Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. After finishing book one, which represented the major events, the main characters, almost all the characters were presented in book one. The writer now starts to pave the way to what comes next concerning the major characters, such as Tom, such as Louisa, Sissy. The writer highlights these three main characters because these three characters will represent the future of Gradgrind's philosophy, and this is what the writer wants to highlight, besides some other characters representing the Industrial Revolution, the working class, the divorce law, and the other side topics. So as you know, we have main issues concerning the fact system that Dickens satirizes, and he wanted to show that this system is not adequate. It only leads to failure, and he will try to demonstrate this fact with the future of Tom and Louisa. So, as you know, book one ended with chapter 16. It had 16 chapters. We understand that Tom is working with Bounderby at the bank. Sparsit now has an apartment in the bank also. Louisa married Bounderby, and no more details are offered in chapter 16 about the marriage. Now in book 2 we will understand how the marriage looks like, how the kind of life they are having, so the new details about this marriage. And Sissy's education is stopped because she is not suitable for this system. These are the main events that took place at the end of book one, sowing the seeds of facts. Book 2 started with reaping, and a title of a chapter that is effects in the bank. So this chapter, it seems very long, but little important details are offered in the chapter. So in the book, generally speaking, in book 2 we are going to reap what we sow in book 1. reaping يعني يحصد، يجمع أو يحصد البذور التي تم زرعها in book 1. So I have some notes here at the end of the chapter. I summarized. Sparsit now. The chapter hinges on these main ideas actually, and we will try to highlight them in particular. Sparsit in the bank. As you know, Sparsit was suggested by Bounderby that she moves to the bank because it's inadequate for her to live at his house with Louisa. So he thinks that it is more suitable for Sparsit to move to an independent apartment, and Bounderby has already prepared an apartment for her at the bank. And he also appointed a kind of a servant, a porter for her, who's Bitzer. We know that Bitzer is one of the brilliant students of the School of Facts. If you remember in chapter 2 and 3, he defined the horse in the most scientific and factual way, and he used to be considered as an example of the School of Facts. And the chapter gives us an idea, or gives us actually ideas about the life of Bitzer and how he is portrayed in chapter 1 and chapter 1 book 2. So he is the true exemplary person of the fact system that Dickens wanted us to understand. This is the prototype of the school of facts that you want to develop for the society, for the people, because he will show so many negative aspects, qualities, characteristics of this character. Showing him Bitzer as the fruit of the fact system. The chapter also tries to give us an idea about a newcomer to the scene of the novel. So chapter 1 started with presenting a new character that we will understand as James. His name is James. It will be revealed a little bit later. So these are the major events that took place in this very long chapter. We have so many words and details offered in the chapter, but we need to highlight only these issues. A sunny midsummer day. There was such a thing sometimes even in Coketown. Seen from a distance in such weather, Coketown lay shrouded in a haze of its own. الهيز يعني السmoke, which is related to the Industrial Revolution. You only knew the town was there because you knew there could have been no such sulky blotch upon the prospect without a town. So the Industrial Revolution, the smoke, the products of the factories make it difficult to see that there is a city over here. I skipped these details because they are not very important. I summarized everything. Now we understand that Mrs. Sposset's living in an apartment at the bank on the shadier side of the Frying Street, etc. And these details are made clear. And that she has a serving woman. She is deaf. And a porter completed Mrs. Sposset's empire. شخص يعمل معها اللي هو Bitzer. The light porter placed the tea tray on it, knuckling his forehead as a form of homage. "Thank you, Bitzer," said Sposset. "Thank you, ma'am." He was a very light porter indeed, as light as in the days when a very light porter. "All is shut up, Bitzer," said Mrs. Sposset. "All is shut up, and what?" said Sposset, pouring out tea. "Is the news of the day?" "Well, so she is asking him about the news. He seems to be just like an informant, a person, a spy, an informant, a person who tries to feed Sposset's curiosities, feed her with the details she needs. "I can't say that I have heard anything particular. Our people are a bad lot, ma'am, but that is no news, unfortunately. Merely going on in the old way, ma'am, uniting and leaguing." He is talking about the workers, that the workers are uniting and leaguing, making leagues and engaging to stand by one another. So this idea is concerned with the working class, that they are trying to make workers unions. Being united themselves, they ought one and all to set their faces against employing any man who is united with any other, said Sposset. "They have done that, but it rather fell through, ma'am." So Sposset here seems to be against these unions arranged by the workers in order to call for their rights, in order to improve their conditions. So Bitzer is portrayed as a person who transports news, who tells Sposset about the details. Okay, here they are talking about Tom, Louisa's brother. Mr. Thomas, I doubt Mr. Thomas very much, ma'am. This is Bitzer's opinion about Tom. I don't like his ways at all. He doesn't like the way he behaves and acts. And of course, Sparsit must be sharing his opinion. Mrs. Sparsit repeated the shake of the head over her teacup. An individual, ma'am, said Bitzer, has never been what he ought to have been since he first came into the place. This is how Bitzer considers Tom. He is dissipated, extravagant, idler, عاطل, كسول, ومبذر. He is not worth his salt. حتى ما يستاهل الملح اللي ياكله. He wouldn't get it either if he had not a friend and relation at court. So he is not a good person according to Bitzer. He is to be pitied. The last party I have alluded to is to be pitied, ma'am. Yeah, Bitzer, I have always pitied the delusion as to an individual, ma'am, said Bitzer, dropping his voice and drawing nearer. He is improvident. This is how he talks about Bitzer. Then news came that a newcomer is attending, and he is a stranger. What a stranger can want at the bank. A stranger came to the bank with a letter. He wants to see Mr. Bounderby. Here the visitor, all unconscious of Sparset's magnanimous words. If you please, ma'am, the gentleman would wish to see you, said Bitzer, with his light eye at Mrs. Sparset's keyhole. I believe, sir, quotes Mrs. Sparset, you wish to see me? I beg your pardon, turning and removing his hat. Pray excuse me. Though, thought Mrs. Sparsit, as she made a stately bend, 35, good-looking, good figure, good teeth, good voice, good breeding, well-dressed, dark hair, bold eyes, all which Mrs. Sparsit observed in her womanly way, like the Sultan who put his head in the pail of water, merely dipping. Please to be seated, sir, said Mrs. Sparsit. Thank you. This is how he is described. This is the new visitor, the newcomer. And then they sit together and started discussing certain issues. It was once my good or ill fortune, as it may be, before I became a widow, to move in any very different sphere. My husband was a Powler. You know, this idea is confirmed every now and then that she is a Powler and her husband was, and she belongs to a noble family, and these all reflect the problem that Dickens highlights in the novel. Much obliged to you for reminding me. I am the bearer of a letter, Annie, حامل رسالة of introduction to Mr. Bounderby, the banker. Walking through his extraordinarily black town while they were getting dinner ready at the hotel, I asked a fellow whom I met, one of the working people, who appeared to have been taking a shower bath of something fluffy, which I assume to be the raw material. This person is a visitor from London. He carries a letter of introduction to meet Mr. Bounderby. So he directed me to the bank, and he came looking for Bounderby. No, sir, he does not live at the bank. I had no intention of delivering my letter at the present moment, nor have I. And then she directs him to Mr. Bounderby's house. And it seems that the letter from the member for this place, عضو من هذا المكان اللي هو Gradgrind, whom I have had the pleasure of knowing in London. So he is sent by a Gradgrind from London to Coketown with a letter of introduction to Bounderby in order to come to Coketown and meet Bounderby. I have a burning desire to know the details about Louisa, Bounderby's wife. Her father, Louisa's father, gives her such portentously hard-headed reputation. Is she absolutely unapproachable, stunningly clever? By your meaning smile, you think not. You have poured balm into my anxious soul. So he wanted to know something about Louisa. Now we understand that this person is looking for some details about Louisa, and we have to form something in our minds concerning Louisa. What do you think of the gentleman, Bitzer? She asked. Spends a deal of money on his dress, ma'am. So he seems to be a good-looking person. He looks to me as if he gamed. It's ridiculous because the chances are against the players. So these are the major details that this chapter offers. When we try to link chapter 1 to the structure of the novel, we need to understand what goes on in the bank, effects in the bank, some kind of impacts or influences that take place in the bank. Bitzer and Louisa are looking for details for news about the workers and how they are uniting. طبعا تفصيلة صغيرة ينطيها الكاتب الآن, and he will develop later concerning the unions of the workers. And how Bitzer and Sposset consider Tom that he is that kind of idler, extravagant, a bad person who does not own or does not deserve this place. And it also highlighted the new visitor, a new character that came from London with a letter of introduction from Mr. Gradgrind to Bounderby in order to introduce this person to Bounderby. And he showed his passion to meet Louisa and asking about her news. These are the main details that we can have about this very long chapter. We try to link this chapter with the next chapter in the next lecture, inshallah.